Right, the Reds talking Reds. Me, Gareth Roberts. I've got Hughes from The Athletic with me today. And all the buzz at the moment, is about Thiago again. Seems to go quiet for a little bit. Now it's been reignited and everyone's getting really excited again. Of the official line, or, I read the Echo this morning, they're saying current understanding is Thiago is not an active target at this time. But then you've got fellas like, and I don't even know who this fella is, but everyone's like, whoa, piled on it. Fabrizio Romano, who tweeted last night, Liverpool are in contact with Munich for Thiago. The player would love to join. Klopp wants him, and he's still working on a contract for Wijnaldum. That was hard to say. Also, he says Bayern want no less than 30 million euros to sell Thiago. It's now up to Liverpool. There was another fella who got involved as well. I haven't got his name to hand. But what I enjoyed, and might make you laugh, is someone reacted to it on Twitter last night saying he's basically Munich's James Pearce.
So got James Pearce on this then, shouldn't you?
But it's coming from somewhere that, someone. We know how these go on, and they turn into sagas, and people are briefing somewhere along the line, and all that kind of gear. To run through the facts and figures, Thiago's 29, out of contract in 10 months. He seems to have decided that 7 Bundesliga titles is quite enough in Germany, and he fancies something else now. Obviously, formerly of Barcelona as well, Spanish international. Everyone seems to be really sold on the fact that he's got quality. Obviously, he can play anywhere centrally in midfield. That's about it. What's your sort of take on it? And have you heard anything? And, all that kind of gear. Yeah. The transfer madness.
I did sort of see that development yesterday and thought, the next 24 hours going to go into overdrive again. Liverpool's position hasn't changed from day one, really. Sometimes you do have to read between the lines a little bit. The word coming back to me was, certainly not negative about the player, but just the reality of the world around us at the moment. And obviously, that since Liverpool have signed a player, a new left back, but at this moment in time, I think that they're clearly thinking about everything that they do very, very carefully. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp likes the player. I don't think that's that's beyond doubt. But I do think that for this deal to have any chance of happening, bearing in mind that he's 29, bearing in mind that he's got a year left in his contract, I think that Bayern's expectations are probably going to have to maybe fall away a little bit from that 30 million, to be honest. Knowing the way Liverpool, just everybody can see the way Liverpool have operated over the last couple of years. The one interesting thing for me, two things have been lost a little bit. I think obviously Bayern are still playing in the Champions League, and he's going to be desperate to win that competition, isn't he? So I can't really see there being any firm movements in the next week or so until that competition is over. But what really interests me is over the last sort of 5 years since Liverpool become a force again. Michael Edwards has had great success signing players from clubs, I guess, who wouldn't be challenging Liverpool, if you like. So, Southampton's and various other clubs. You can still put Roma in that category, because I know Roma are a big club. Liverpool got 2 great players out of Roma, but it's a club that you'd expect Liverpool to be able to sign players from in the current climate. Obviously now they're dealing with Bayern Munich. It's a different sort of layer of management and different sort of characters that you're dealing with to try and get deals done. So in the past, Liverpool have had great success trying to get players over the line from clubs who you'd expect Liverpool to be able to sign players from. Now, it's a club that I think would like to probably keep Thiago, but understands that he's got a year left and understand that he wants to do something else. And, they've got good players coming through in those positions at Bayern as well. So they're dealing with a different sort of category of club, a different category of person, different operators who they're probably going to have to treat a little bit differently as they go along. So it'll be interesting to see. You can only take Liverpool's words at face value, and I do trust them when they say that. That at this moment in time, there hasn't been, there's obviously been discussion, but not too many movements. It's funny how football clubs operate as well now. I don't, the old days of sending a fax over or making a phone call, I think clubs try and, as best they can, sort of keep, use intermediaries and stuff like that to sort of get things moving a bit more. And there's probably an interesting article to be written about that. I remember a few years ago when Juan Mata signed from signed for Man United from Chelsea. There's a great article in the Times about how the clubs never actually spoke. It was all done via text. And, I think since then things have changed again. So, as you said, there's tons of people who sort of get involved, particularly when, there's agents like Thiago's agents who's going to be keen to get things moving as well. So we will see. I'm not being evasive when I say that. I mean, I've sort of my position. I got a message off somebody on Twitter yesterday saying, "See, you've been wrong all summer about this." I was like, I've just said the same thing, throughout the summer until something changes. It's like I haven't said it won't happen, but the message coming back was it's going to be sort of harder to make it happen, but that doesn't mean that it won't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth bearing in mind, isn't it, that, the transfer window's open until October the 5th. Yeah. And as you say, sort of one season hasn't even finished officially yet because you've got the European football still to be concluded. So I guess it's one of them where, we shall see how it develops. I mean, I think it's interesting, and other people have touched on it, that, you said there, Klopp has been not outspoken. He's not saying it every week, but he's said openly, hasn't he, that he admires the player. Equally as well, I kind of thought when he was asked about it on the record, he wasn't like 1,000,000% no, if you know what I mean. Like he has been in the past over other things. So I think people can see a chink of light there and think, well, maybe.
Yeah, well, I can understand that because usually if something is, I mean, I tend not to deal with transfers too much in the job that I do, but from my experience, James will probably be in a better position to explain. But if something isn't happening, I've never known Liverpool to say no, and then it does happen. Whereas, as you say, there seems to be a bit more sort of context and discussion around the reason on this one, which makes you think, there's a possibility.
Even active target, what the Echo have said there is interesting, isn't it? If you want to dig into the sort of semantics.
So at this moment in time, it isn't, but it could be in a few hours potentially.
Yeah. So it's just interesting terminology. That active target is like, well, so he is a target, but it's just not active right now, or It's not like I don't know. It doesn't seem absolutely no. It doesn't seem absolutely dead in the water. I think, as you say, Si, it's probably going to come down to that fate because
it'll come down. I think if you was to ask me, I think it will come down to money because he's going to be a big earner as well.
Yeah,
he's going to be a massive earner. People got to remember that. So what happens next is when he comes on on big wages, that then potentially rises the wages of a lot of current players as well, because it's not necessarily the players who'll be saying, well, I should be getting paid more. The agents will be knocking down the door saying, well, come on, we've got you to this stage. Liverpool are champions of England, champions of Europe still. What about the pay rise for everybody else as well? So all these things that you've got to consider, and they're obviously aware of all that, potentially happening. So I think it's a very carefully balanced game, this, isn't it? And we'll see over the next few weeks, as you say. I mean, October, the agony will continue for another couple of months.
What do you reckon on Gini? Because there's a conversation around Gini as well, going about is he going to get this new deal? He's another one where he's out of contract, isn't he? In a year, I think Milner's in the same boat as well. What's your feelings on Gini? What have you heard on that?
Well, I mean, I remember writing about it in January, around, I think it was around the time he played West Ham away. And I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm quite surprised it hasn't got further down the line, really, because he's an important player, isn't he? He plays more or less all the big games. In fact, all the big. I just say I question that because he obviously got brought on as a sub against Barcelona, but I thought last season he was fantastic. For me, he was one of certainly the top three players. I thought, I mean, I saw a lot of games from sort of pitch level where I was sitting in a lot of games last season. I think it's only when you get really close you realise just what a fabulous player he is. The way he keeps the ball, he never gives the ball away. He plays a very important tactical role in the team. Finding somebody to replace that, I mean, Thiago would be a different sort of player if we're talking about a replacement. I don't think that's in the thought process at the moment. I think, from what I can tell, that they want to keep Wijnaldum and obviously potentially, if you go for Thiago, bolster the squad as well. So it's a strange one because I remember a couple of summers ago there was all sorts of talk about him going to think Fenerbahce at the time, and I thought he's underselling himself a little bit there. So, I mean, the one thing I'd say is, I mean, I know his agent's a pretty uncompromising bloke who will be driving a hard bargain, I'm sure. I mean, he's at a difficult age, isn't he, as a player? 29 to be renegotiating a contract. I'm sure in his head he'd like to commit himself to Liverpool for the rest of his career. Well, for the bulk of the rest of his career, potentially sign a 3 or 4 year contract, which would take him, up until 33, 32, 33. I mean, he seems to me to be the sort of player who could play, do a sort of bit of a Milner, really, because he's robust. He never gets injured. He's fit. He's probably one of the fittest players in the team, I would imagine. You can't imagine his levels going down. So, yeah, I mean, it's dragged on a long time, which is a cause for some concern, I guess, because when these sorts of situations do drag on and they go into the final year, I think it becomes a lot harder for the club wanting to keep the player. So yeah, for me, it should be a priority. But maybe the manager, maybe the club are thinking slightly differently about the way forward. Liverpool, I know, obviously Liverpool had great success with the way the team plays and sort of the midfield as being sort of very energetic and filling the spaces for the fullbacks getting forward. But maybe, who knows? Klopp's always got a trick up his sleeve, hasn't he, to try and keep sort of redefining the identity of the team and make it harder to play against. So maybe that's all part of the jigsaw.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about the resilience of Wijnaldum, because you look at his appearance record for Liverpool. If you just take the league games, he's been here 4 seasons and he's played 36 league games in his first season, or 36 appearances in the league, 33 the following season, 35 the season after, and 37 the season just gone. So he's hardly missed a game. He's been available. Okay, some of those appearances are substitutions, but he's pretty much been there all the way through his 4 years at the club. And I guess, that's what him and his agent will be saying when they're talking to Liverpool. They'll be like, okay, I'm 29, but I'm in really good shape. I'm sure he's talked before as well. I seem to remember he's talked about playing. He wants to play long into as long as he can. He's not one of those, he doesn't seem like one of those players who's saying, I've got an mid-30s, that's it, I'm done, I'm off, and I'm going to go and lie on the beach. He seems to want to play football for as long as he can.
He's just a proper footballer, really, isn't he? What does that mean? I mean, I just think that, he loves being on the pitch. He wants to be on the pitch all the time. He wants to be involved. He wants to be, he's subtly a very important player in this team, I think. Probably, I wouldn't say he's undervalued, because I think that certainly match goers, you won't hear a single one say anything bad about him.
Yeah.
He's never been a player who's divided opinion, but I just think, with the sort of the high-risk football Liverpool play, which it still is, you do take risks. He's the one player who you can just trust 100%. I mean, how many mistakes has he made in his Liverpool career? I know people might say, well, assists, could do with some more assists from him, but that's not his role in the team. I still don't think sometimes people realise that it's the wide areas where you're getting your creativity from, mainly. The central areas are actually sort of to protect those wide areas, and he does such a good job in that midfield. I think it doesn't look I don't know. For me, when he doesn't play, the midfield doesn't look quite as organised as well. I think he's a really good organiser. Let's not forget as well, he's one of the captains of the team. Remember, a couple of years ago, they named 4 captains, and I think he's the 4th choice captain. Am I right in saying, behind Van Dijk? He was the one who was voted by the players. So he's a leader as well behind the dressing room. All the players clearly respect him, as a voice there. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, and I do hope that they get it done, because I've really enjoyed watching him play. I just think he's a top class player who get into pretty much any team in the world, really. I think he's fantastic.
Well, on transfers, myself and a few others from the Anfield app, we went over to the Wirral, went over to the Farmers Arms in Frankby, which was quality. Pub run by a friend of ours, Paul Senior. And we did a show out there called Bedding Out. It's normally called Bedding In, but we were in the beer garden, so it was Bedding Out this time. And on the episode that's just come out this week, we were talking about players that Liverpool were in for but didn't get. We missed out on and all that. And so we all had our memories of that. Here is a clip from our subscription show, Bedding Out.
Souness is quite open and honest now about the fact that he could have took Schmeichel And Platini had spoken to him about Cantona as well. And because he was fighting fires, Souness, with his goalkeepers at the time, he didn't respond to Peter Schmeichel, who'd actually written to the club and said, listen, let me come for a trial for free, I'll pay for my own digs. Liverpool don't follow it up. And then the Cantona one, I mean, you wonder how and what history would it look like if Liverpool, Platini speaks to him, obviously they knew each other from the time in Italy and said, listen, there's a lad here, he's a bit fucking mad by the way, but it might be worth a little look, and we don't
could have had Ronaldo.
And that's, you know,
could have had Ronaldo. That's another Phil Thompson story, isn't it? Where he says that United played 3 times what Liverpool thought they were going to pay for him. But
I don't think they regretted it.
I know,
The Schmeichel one's mad because if you think how many, like I remember just as a kid, even in school with David James, how many points he used to cost us. Imagine if you had Schmeichel through that period.
One of my mates stole fumes about James. Just can't abide him. Just doesn't forgive him.
No.
One of my bits on all of this is, I think a lot of the time, our management teams in those eras are just a bit behind the curve. And I don't mean that as like to be overtly critical. They're very much, they're still fighting last year's war.
Yeah.
And I think that's something which is a bit. So the thing about Anelka, which is dead interesting, but I think the thing about Anelka is he ends up doing brilliant work in a 3 up front with Drogba for Chelsea. But the then management team at Liverpool are like, can he work? Will it work in a 4-4-2 week in, week out like this? And they can't get the brains into the fact that, well, it might be a bit different, or it might mould, or it might change.
He was so clever, O'Neill, he could drop Anelka and play.
I'm with you 100%. But my point is more, they couldn't quite see the direction of travel. I think Ronaldo was another, and it's the same era, I don't mean to criticise the same people, because we just done Schmeichel as well. But like Ronaldo is another really good example of, he does at that period of Sporting Lisbon, and when he first comes to United, he does a lot of bullshit. But imagine what it looks like in 5 years.
Okay, so there's a clip from Bedding Out. If you want to go and watch the full episode of that, download the Anfield app. You can get some free tokens. You don't have to subscribe. You can just have a go with the premium content, and then if it's for you, hopefully you will subscribe. On that side, quickly, what's the player for Liverpool that we missed out on that sort of still does your head in? Have you got one where you're like, I wish we would have got him? And for me, it was always Laudrup, because I know that's going back some years, but I just really fancied that idea, and it seemed like it was on, and then it wasn't on, and we didn't get him. And then every time you saw him, you were like, imagine him for Liverpool.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple that jump out. I mean, more recently, I would have loved to have seen Diego Costa up front with Suarez. That would have been absolutely insane. Like, Liverpool would have been the most, well, if they're not already, the most hated team in the country. I mean, I think it was been an absolute riot, you know. So, yeah, I would have liked to have seen that. I don't know really how close that deal was, to be honest. I mean, it seemed to me to be one of those where, we were interested, but, you know, I don't think Liverpool were ever close to getting him. But that would have been good fun. I mean, in a practical sense, I would have liked Damien Duff. You know, back in 2003-04 period, because I think he would have been a really good player for Liverpool, and I thought, you know, when he played for Chelsea, I thought he was outstanding for them, and then, I don't know, seemed to lose a bit of his fire, you know, I think by going there maybe a little bit, and sort of his career faded away in the end, but I think he could have been a good player for Liverpool in that period, for both Julio and for Rafa, because I think he's the sort of player. I wish I could replace Kuhl for Duff, actually. Because I just prefer sort of, at that time, I think, you know, flying wingers just get you off your feet, don't they, and off your seat. And I remember a couple of games at Anfield where he was outstanding. Just thought he could have been good for us, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, another player we've been linked with in recent days is Ben White, who was on loan at Leeds. He's down at Brighton. He's being touted as being someone who could cost upwards of 30 million quid. He's a 22-year-old centre-half. Brighton, of course, insist the defender is not for sale. I love all the rhetoric around transfers. I know people have done books on it before, but you know the risery offer and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what do you think on this one? People are talking about the centre half of Liverpool, obviously, because of Dejan Lovren leaving. Some people are fixing that particular sort of jigsaw by saying, well, we'll get Thiago, and then Fabinho can drop back to be a centre half if need be, if Matip and Gomez were injured or whatever, you know, whatever way you want to do it. Do you think Liverpool might go in for someone like Ben White, or?
Well, he fits the profile, doesn't he? They definitely have been looking at him. I know it's obviously a position that they've been aware of change coming, because obviously they were going to sell Lovren last summer if he'd have had the way. He was up for sale then, really. So, again, I think it does come down to the price. I mean, one of the things that sort of came out of Liverpool when the deal for Jamal Lewis never happened was, they're saying there's better value abroad at the moment because, English clubs don't really know. I mean, I suppose no club in Europe knows how the landscape is going to be, but particularly English clubs not having, bearing in mind the attendances are consistently so high in English football grounds. The grounds are regularly sold out in England, whereas not quite the case in Italy and various other countries, even in Spain. That's going to obviously have a massive hit, isn't it? So they realise that they're going to get a better value for Simicast than they would for Jamal Lewis. Who, by the way, I mean, I've heard a sort of an alternative version with Simicast whereby, that he was actually the transfer target number one. And there was, elements of trying to get his value in line with what they wanted by using, bids for other players, which if that was true, I mean, I don't know how true that is. It's very difficult to get to the bottom of that, but they clearly like the player. I mean, this is the thing. I don't think Liverpool ever go, they've always got a list of 4 players and each position's well known, and he was high up there. And, they'll have a list of 4 players at centre half, which is clearly a position which I can understand the concern around it because, Van Dijk is obviously there every game, and you'd hope that he'd be there, for every game next season. But Matip's injury record last season wasn't great. Obviously, Lovren, that's well documented. And then you're hoping Gomez is going to do what he hasn't done yet in his career and play the whole season. Because it's quite clear if they could be the partnership for a very long time, but it's just whether he can get himself into that position where he's available all the time. So as I imagine he's definitely on the he's clearly definitely he's on the radar. I mean, to give a flavour of what Brighton potentially would be looking for. I mean, Leeds, Phil Hay at the Athletic, he reported that Leeds had put a £22 million bid in for him and had that rejected. It's a lot of money, isn't it, for the player who potentially might not be first pick all the time. So that's obviously something that Liverpool are going to have to consider. I mean, I saw a bit of him last season. I was really impressed. Phil, as I say, Phil Hay speaks very highly of him, says, he seems to have the lot really, sort of, the physicality could do with a little bit more growth, but he's still only, I think, 22, not long, 22 maybe. So, with defenders, they probably get that physical growth a little bit later, don't they, than maybe players sometimes. So, I mean, the one big thing about him is there was an article in The Athletic this week about sort of his stats. I know we sort of talk about his stats, and his stats are very, very good, in terms of everything that you'd look for in a defender. And when that happens, that you're on Liverpool's radar straight away, really. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see it as. I think the left back was probably a greater priority really this season. And one of the things that I mentioned to James, I mean, I was on a chat with James before he went away on holiday. He's off at the moment, and I was wondering as well. He's talking about sort of players moving around positionally. Let's not forget Andy Robertson's played centre half for Scotland, or be it in a left-sided centre half in a 3. Now, I do wonder sometimes, Liverpool, the way it's been for them this season, a lot of games where, really the sort of the opposition's hope is, you can get them on the counter attack. Wonder whether in Klopp's head, who knows, might be thinking, could sometimes put him in left-sided centre half. Who knows? Again, I'm being speculative there, but I just think.
We've seen Wijnaldum there, haven't we?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen Henderson. Henderson played really well in a, let's face it, an important game. Really. If Liverpool get beaten that game and Henderson makes a mistake at centre half, it's going to be, there's going to be problems, isn't there? So there are other players other than Fabinho as well. I mean, the conversation around Fabinho is an interesting one for me because the way I see it, I think, and the way I hear it, he's the number one man in the midfield, isn't he? Really, Fabinho. When he's fit and firing, I think he came back after lockdown, and you could see straight away he was back the way he was before he got the injury. I just think he's got everything, hasn't he? He wants in that position, and it would be a big call to pull him out of there. I think, even though he played so well against Bayern Munich, in the game at Anfield a couple of years ago. I think it'd be a big call to pull him out of that position, but we will see. We'll see. I think Klopp always has couple of tricks up his sleeve, doesn't he? You know, and he's not afraid, as you say, of putting in some games some players slightly out of position. I was just thinking, you forget Wijnaldum played centre forward in the new camp. It's just insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he did all right as well, I thought. But it's just mad, isn't it? The way sort of things can change very quickly in terms of the way players are perceived because of the way Klopp thinks about the game.
Yeah, he loves a little wild card, doesn't he? You mentioned the Athletic there, Si, and been some good stuff on there this week as ever. And I enjoyed the piece about, could Klopp ever field 11 Scousers, and the stuff about the academy there, and so that that's a good read. What else have you got? What else have you got coming up on there, mate?
Well, I'm doing a piece today, just on deadline actually, so let's get off in a minute. But yeah, it's a piece just about like the significance of under-23 football, because obviously it was quite interesting. I thought just the reaction to Gary O'Neill getting a job. There hasn't been much conversation about the under-23s. Seen as quite a big deal, wasn't it? He's got this job, he's the assistant manager. It just got me thinking, is it really that that important? Is the job that important? Is that level of football important? So I've been obviously speaking to a few people this week just to try and get to the bottom of that. I think it's just because, a lot of people say, oh, it's just, it's not what it was, sort of reserve team football, which clearly it isn't, but it's changed and evolved. And there are some benefits to it, but it's just, I think one thing that has become clear, Klopp sort of came in 5 years ago with quite a dim view of it, but has sort of realised how it can help as well at times. So, hopefully I'll be finishing that off soon, and then that should be going up on the website the next day or two.
Yeah, there's always loads of stuff to read on there. Obviously, not just about Liverpool as well. There was a Mesut Ozil exclusive yesterday, which ended up everywhere else, all over Sky and everything else. So yeah, if you want to get involved with The Athletic, it's theathletic.co.uk. You got Si there, you got James Pearce there, and then a whole host of journalists from all over the country as well doing the stuff. So there was loads to read on there. Si, nice one for coming on today, mate. We'll get you on again soon. Let you get back to your deadline. And yeah, up the Reds. We'll see what happens with all these transfers. Nice one, Si.
Cheers. Nice one.